Okay, so I'm going to show you today some tips and tricks for Windows Azure, how it works. How many people are developing for the cloud right now? Okay. How many people understand the difference between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service? Most people? Okay. I'll give a real brief review for those of you who might be new to this. I'm going to show you how to deploy Solr on Windows Azure and talk about developing for Solr on Windows Azure as well. So, Solr on Windows Azure, I've got a couple of demos that I wanted to show you. I'll just show you the PHP one for now. That's probably the easiest. And of course, resolution's all off. So I've got a couple of demos. I like to start with a demo just because it gives you an idea of what we're going to hook everything else around. So I've got a simple demo. It's a multi-tier web application. We're looking at PHP right now. I've also got one for ASP.NET, and I'll describe what it does, but it looks pretty much the same. It hits a Windows Azure instance of Solr on the back end. So we've got Nutch running, we've got Solr running in a Windows virtual machine. I'm sorry, actually a Linux virtual machine. Most of you probably wouldn't think that a Microsoft presentation would show Linux virtual machine, but it does. And I'll get into the details of that in a little bit. So Linux virtual machine is running Solr and Nutch. It's indexing windowsazure.com and a Lucene website. When you type anything here, the type ahead picks up the application. It's a simple PHP app. It runs on what we call a Windows Azure website, which is the front end. The back tier is a virtual machine running Linux with Solr and Nutch, et cetera, et cetera. And I've also got an ASP.NET application that looks a lot like this as well. So, how do we make this work? We've got a dashboard and Nutch management over here. And then we've got Solr, IaaS, infrastructure as a service. We've got an index and storage. And over here, in what we call Windows Azure website, which is a middle tier, you've got browser apps, PHP and ASP.NET, which are deployed from from some tools that we have called WebMatrix. But you can also deploy them from GitHub and some other things. I'll show you that as well. The top tier is a browser. So Windows Azure, what is it? Windows Azure actually runs Windows. It runs Linux. We've got Java. We've got PHP. We've got all kinds of things that you can use as a developer. Microsoft is very good at making developer tools, as most of you probably already know, making things easy to deploy. So what we're trying to do is we've got the cloud, Windows Azure, and we're trying to create different scenarios that are easy to access and deploy for developers. You don't need a lot of administration. So we've got virtual machines, that's infrastructure as a service, which is just basically your bare bones server you put your own operating system on. Could be Linux, could be Windows. We have cloud services, which is platform as a service, which manages a little bit of the virtual machine for you. And then we got websites, which is software as a service, which manages everything for you. You just put your application code on it. So IaaS is your virtual machines. PaaS, platform as a service, is for building applications, and software as a service is for consuming them. So for things like Drupal, Joomla, WordPress, PHP apps, ASP.NET, things like that, you put them here. Platform as a service, you can put all kinds of things that you want to have the operating system managed for you. Solr is actually a case in there. We use, for LucidWorks service, which we have as well, we use platform as a service as what we call a worker role to manage these things. And I'll explain what that is in a little bit. Infrastructure as a service, like I say, just the bare bones. So what's in these things? Your typical packaged software application. Applications, data, runtime, middleware, OS, virtualization, servers. All of these building blocks you manage yourself. Actually, these you manage yourself when you use infrastructure as a service. Platform as a service, you just manage your applications, your data, the runtime, middleware, OS, things like that. If you want to have a version of Windows on there, we'll update it for you. Linux as well. We have 4 endorsed versions of Linux that we use. Software as a service, everything is managed. Applications, data, you just put your code on top of it, and it runs automatically for you. Everything's updated. So we are very flexible. A little bit about myself. I work for a group called Microsoft Open Technologies Incorporated. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Microsoft, and we work with all of these open source and many more vendors that you probably recognize. Our mission is to work with open source on Windows Azure in the cloud and on devices. VM Depot. Has anyone ever heard of VM Depot? I thought I'd take a shot. It's fairly new. VM Depot is Linux virtual machines. It's actually a marketplace where you can take a Linux virtual machine. Very risky, I know. I'm going to go in a new tab here. I can handle that much. I can click. Here we go. The keys are different. I used to work with a Mac, but it's been a while, so it's taken me a little bit here. But VM Depot, msopentech.com. So VM Depot is actually a site that you can go out and access. It is virtual machine images, and we have, for example, Solr. So what are these? What is this? It's a marketplace where you can actually find well, I showed you, you saw the screen. It's looking for Solr right now. I'm not sure what's happening. But there we go. It's slowly coming back. It's faster than this, trust me. It's the Wi-Fi here. But it is a marketplace where people could actually go out and publish virtual machine images, so they can take one of our 4 endorsed Linux versions, or any other version of Linux that you want to put on it. You take that, you generally take another application like Solr, you put them together, you create a virtual image, and you can actually publish it here for free. And you can use your own branding, you can do that kind of, you can use your own branding, your own configurations. And the idea here is that after this image is published, users can come in, they can download it, and they can deploy it directly to Windows Azure with very little effort. Everything's been pre-configured. In fact, I am working right now. I didn't get it done for today, but I've got plenty to show you anyway. I'm actually working right now on a version of Solr with Nutch pre-configured on Ubuntu Linux that works in multi-node using Zookeeper. So it's something that you could actually just deploy. Let's take 3 of these. So you download the image, you publish it, or deploy it 3 times onto Windows Azure, and it can be easily connected with Zookeeper. So with a combination of documentation and configuration, you can do this sort of thing. So like I said, Microsoft is very good at handling your needs as a developer and abstracting a lot of the things that you need to work with so you don't have to configure and manage them. So we've got, for example, application building blocks, services for big data, database, storage, traffic, all these things you see here. I'll cover a couple of these, and the reason I want to show you this is that we're actually taking advantage of some of those. So the idea here is services, not servers. Just like any other cloud, we have a global data center footprint. I'll show you that in a second. We have options. Like I said, we have websites, we have platforms as a service, infrastructure as a service, and managed building block services. If you want a SQL database, you literally choose a couple of drop-down options, and you've got a SQL database running that you can access from your applications. Like I say, we have a global footprint. We have 8 locations at the moment in the US, and we have some sub-locations as well around. You can deploy to any one of these locations. And I'll show you why that's significant in a minute. Even if you don't deploy to those locations, you can deploy, like I said, some of the sub-locations, West DC, East DC. Even if you don't, your data, no matter what it is behind the scenes automatically deployed to 3 locally redundant nodes, LRNs we call them. So if any one of these nodes drops off, another one will come in its place, take over for you. Also, the geolocation and the georeplication is actually turned on by default. You literally have to turn it off when you deploy something to stop that. So there's a lot of redundancy built in, a lot of reliability built in, and you don't really need to think about it. That's what we're trying to do with Windows Azure. Of course, we charge for storage and we charge for networks, but we're trying to make it worth the money that you're spending to have the reliability and the storage and the power, scalability that you need with very little effort. So Solr on Windows. What I'm going to show you here is a little bit about how to deploy it. So the reason why I showed you all that stuff, the VM depot, you've got an Apache Solr version here. We've got several versions out of VM depot. There's a script that you literally choose from a download. So you say, generate a script for this package. When you generate that script, this is what it looks like. So there's something we call the multi-platform CLI that you download from windowsazure.com. It is a command line interface. It runs on Linux, it runs on Macs, it runs on Windows. And you put this script in it, and when you run this script, as long as you're logged into Windows Azure and you have an account, an active subscription, it will actually deploy a version of this to Solr. So what are we looking at here? So Azure VM create, that's the command we're using. Benz Solr is the name of the instance we're going to create. This is the unique ID for this image. So this unique ID tells it where to get the actual image that's going to publish out to Windows Azure. The location, as I mentioned, we have 8 locations. So in this case, we're going to deploy it to the West US. We're going to use the ID Benz. We're going to use this password. And the name of the Solr instance is going to be Benz-Solr VM, so you can find it in your subscription. That's one way to do it. We also have Azure subscription. We have a dashboard that you can go into, and you literally just pick all the images. As you can see, we've got alfresco. We've got a grab bag of images that you can use. In this case, you choose Apache. We have, as I mentioned, 4 endorsed versions of Linux that you can use: Ubuntu, CentOS, SUSE, and OpenSUSE. And in this case, what we've done is we've created some pre-configured packages in our dashboard that you can use. The other images, there's hundreds of images out there that are very specialized. So, but these ones are sort of a short list of images that people want to create. So from your dashboard, you can do that. You choose your VM configuration. In this case, you choose the name. So this is similar to what you saw in that script. You choose the size. In this case, just a small. And we have small, medium, and large with availability set configurations, storage configurations, all kinds of different options. I'm going through these fairly quick because we only have about half an hour. So the virtual machine mode, you can choose a standalone virtual machine, or in this case, because you went through the menu in the dashboard, you can connect to an existing virtual machine. So you have a VM already created. It will actually deploy this out to that VM. So virtual machine options, high availability sets. Like I said, literally a drop-down box. That's what we're trying to do here. Do you want an availability set? Do you want geo-replication between East US and Asia? Okay, you can actually drop down an availability set that you've already pre-configured, and it will use that availability set to basically spray your data across different locations. Over on the right here, we've got subscription information. That's the unique ID again that we used for that, location, West US, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens next after that, whether or not you go through VM Depot or through the dashboard, it sets up your software. It sets up an infrastructure as a service instance, and does network and disk provisioning depending on your availability set configuration and stuff like that, either local or geo-replicated. Next thing you do, there's some endpoints that you need to set up. It's pretty straightforward for Solr. You've got 80. And for connecting to other facilities, et cetera, 89, 83. This is what your dashboard looks like when it's actually been created. You've got all kinds of information here. Now, when you're building an application, obviously this is just the starting point. You've got a version of Solr running. To build the application, you want to download the published profile. Sorry, it's a bit small to see. That says download publish profile. What you do is just literally click on that, and it creates a XML file with all kinds of information that your application is going to need to access this. It creates a unique ID, it creates a DNS URL, ID, password information, stuff like that you can use. That can be unique for each application that you're going to use to access this virtual machine. So the Solr dashboard on Windows Azure, I'm really glad I took screenshots of these. I was going to show them live, but took this as a backup. So this is just the dashboard. When you go into Solr, most of you have probably already seen this. You actually just hit it from a web browser, and that's what it looks like. So you've got your dashboard for Windows Azure, which is all your configuration option for the virtual machine. Then you've got your dashboard for Solr. The next thing I want to talk to you about is developing for Solr. So, as I mentioned, we've got two apps. We've got a PHP app and an ASP.NET app. I want to talk a little bit about the facilities that we have, how you can actually manage coding, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so Windows Azure Developer Center. Some of you were probably surprised that we had Linux for Windows Azure, but we also handle Node.js, Java, PHP, Python, and several other applications. Some of the things that I'll cover some of the things that would be of interest to Solr developers. But we have a lot of SDKs that we're creating, and the idea behind these SDKs is they work with popular IDEs to actually help you develop, test, and deploy to Azure. So we have developer centers, and each one of these developer centers, if you go to windowsazure.com, you drop down the documentation, developer centers, and you'll see all the ones we have, and we're adding more all the time. We just added a Ruby, actually, a little while ago. We also have flexible forum options. You can ask your questions on Stack Overflow for peers, and also we monitor that. For any SDK questions or any Azure questions, those are actually monitored by Microsoft at Microsoft Open Technologies. And of course we have the MSDN, which we have a lot of facilities there for app developers as well. Always have. WindowsAzure.github.com. This is a great resource. We have a lot of open source projects out there that you can get the code for. And I'll talk a little bit about Git integration in a little bit. msopentech.github.com. We also have several here, including some developer tools for Windows Azure. So we have an SDK for Java. We also have an Eclipse plugin. And you can get those from these links. I'll send out a PDF of the presentation afterwards. We also have a tool. Who's heard of WebMatrix? Couple people. That's actually more than normal. So we have WebMatrix. This is our own free tool that we built for PHP and some other languages, and you can actually deploy from GitHub as well from that. And there's an article here, a great article about deploying from GitHub using some of our tools, using other tools, including Visual Studio, and how to actually publish things to Windows Azure from GitHub and other repositories. Somebody was talking to me earlier about why don't we have integration. Does anybody know what, is everyone familiar with CodePlex? It's the Microsoft repository. They were asking why we don't have more integration with CodePlex and GitHub, and actually we do. We just hadn't checked for a while. These things are evolving all the time, and we've actually added to Visual Studio and WebMatrix really good facilities for integrating CodePlex. It's exactly the same thing to deploy from GitHub or CodePlex or a few other repositories as well. So the Eclipse plugin, what does this do? And this is typical for all the tools that we're building. The Eclipse plugin, how many people work with Eclipse when they're building applications? Okay, a few of you? Okay, good. Eclipse plugin itself allows you to do two main things. So you download the Eclipse plugin, you put it into Eclipse. You can test just by hitting a little green button. You can create a Windows Azure emulator, which you can actually run your Java code exactly the way it'll run in Windows Azure. You can test it out. You can make sure it works. And once you're done with the testing, you're happy with it, you can actually just literally push that button, and it publishes to the Windows Azure cloud I have a whole separate presentation on this, so I won't get into it here, but you can actually, as long as you're logged into that subscription through a web browser on your local machine, it will actually publish it out to a deployment instance. There's a test instance and a deployment instance. It'll actually publish it right out, and it's usable instantly. So as I mentioned, oh yeah, I forgot, I have this slide. WebMatrix and Git. So WebMatrix, and this is similar for Visual Studio now. You can open a site from Git, you can clone a GitHub repository, TFS, if any of you are using TFS, a Team Foundation server, and then Codeplex as well. And it's the same for all of these. You can actually literally pull things in to WebMatrix, Visual Studio from GitHub, manipulate it, and publish it out to Windows Azure. So that's the idea. We're trying to make this really easy to go out and get things and then put them on Windows Azure and run them with very little effort. So I want to show you a little bit of the code we have as well. The code itself, as I mentioned, we've got our information. Why do I keep saying that? Infrastructure as a service. We've got a dashboard and Nutch and some management for Solr. We've got the index and storage, and then we got a Windows Azure website. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about the code that goes into the Windows Azure website. And I can share this code with you if anyone's interested. It's a couple of zip files. I just have to pull out our passwords. So the main form itself is very simple, as you can see when you're looking at this application. Don't know if I should have done that. So the application, as I mentioned before, you just type test. There's some results there. It automatically pulls the data in with each key press. So we've got the incremental search going on there. So the main form is very simple for the PHP. I'm just going to show you some selected pieces of the code. Each time there's a key press, it passes a that string to the PHP server that's running on the Windows Azure website. It's sent via the via REST. It's using JSON. We use curl. How many people are PHP developers here? No? Okay. So I think I'll go through this real quick then. So curl is a handy way to decode URLs in PHP. You can retrieve the data, you get the result string from JSON, and basically decode it, and it displays it in the area below. ASP.NET, Visual Studio. We're in Visual Studio. You literally create a new project and a Visual C# template. It looks like this when you start, and then what we did is we customized some of it. So this is what the screen would have looked like if I showed it to you, and allows you to just do the same thing. You just type a search word, and you can hit enter to search, or it's an incremental search as well. So the main form for that one is basically just, it's actually ASP.NET, but it's calling it a C# application. You have a search word. You create the session with a search word. And you pass some network credentials. That's one thing I wanted to show you. So you can actually pass network credentials. These are secure. So these applications, and by the way, the links I showed you earlier are live. They're working out there, so you can probably try them on your own here. It passes the network credentials to our Solr server, so that it's not an open server. It actually needs to have those credentials to process the request using REST. The response just goes and grabs the response. It once again returns it in JSON, and the response itself is organized. No, I'm sorry. Actually, no, this isn't JSON. This is XML. So this time we're using XML to retrieve the data, and this time we're actually going to. These are the nodes that display the results. And we just do a for each in each one of the nodes. We go through and parse out the title, the description, and the ID from each result. Okay, so that's basically the code that I had to show you. I won't do that now. And that's that. We have time? Yeah, we have time. Actually, Russ, I zipped through that thinking I wouldn't have enough time, but we got 10 minutes. So.
Nobody after us either. So.
Oh, really? Okay, good. That's the PHP. This must be it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there we go. So there you go. That's this one. So Azure. It just shows the same results. They're a little bit differently formatted, but they're parsed out, and you can display the actual results, and it goes to the website itself and retrieves that. So let's see. Let's try another one. So it just shows you the search results, so it just parses through them. So there's a couple of different examples you can share with developers. I'm taking it from the show of hands that there's not a lot of developers in the room, but more interested in deployment. So
not a lot of PHP developers.
A PHP, okay. Java?
ASP.NET.
ASP.NET, okay, perfect. Okay, well there you go. So ASP.NET application, we got a demo for you there. And we got the code. And like I say, I'll show it to you in Visual Studio. I can't do that on this machine, sorry. I was going to, it's all on there. Anyway, if anyone wants to see it after, just let me know, and I'll take some questions. Yeah. You know, that's a question that comes up a lot. So Windows versus Linux. When you're running on Solr, it really, from my experience, it just depends on what admin skills you have in-house. So if you have a Linux shop, you're doing a lot of Linux stuff, I wouldn't recommend starting to struggle with Windows and vice versa. You know, it's something. Now, if you need a lot of RDP access, so you have a lot of developers, for example, who need remote access, when you send up a Windows virtual machine, you can set it up to have RDP. And you can create individuals and give them access and revoke their access for RDP. So that's the only difference I would say, is for Windows, if you have a big developer community who's contributing stuff for short periods of time, you don't have to give them credentials and revoke the credentials and all that stuff. You can set them up with RDP. And HIPAA compliant, I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure about the HIPAA compliance. Yeah, but it does have security. So the reason I showed you in the ASP.NET, I went real quick over that, sorry guys, is the credentials we have is we do actually pass credentials. We have to pass credentials between the Windows Azure website. So we have, let me go back to that page. So we actually have to pass credentials between the Windows Azure website and the virtual machine.
What about the data on the virtual machine? Is it encrypted or not encrypted?
It can be encrypted, yes. We support encryption. We support volatile data sources on the back end as well. So if you have like a big XML file, one of the things we were playing with was when we were writing demos is Stack Overflow. So we tried encrypting that. That was pretty big, and it's 7 gigabytes of Stack Overflow data. And but the index is relatively small. Once we pulled out the words that we were looking for, Azure, Lucid, Solr. Once we pulled those out, it was relatively small, and we encrypted that. We tried it out, and everything worked fine. So yeah. And I should mention the Windows virtual machines. If you have ASP applications that you're using that aren't necessarily web applications or something like that, that's one of the reasons why I showed you the ASP.NET. So if you guys have, Microsoft has 83%. This is a stat I heard last week. 83% still of the market's enterprise applications are written in Microsoft platform applications. So if you don't want to necessarily put it on the web, but you just want to have it accessible by ASP.NET, this is easily adapted to your applications. And it does support security, full security with Windows or Linux, yeah. The question is, Solr and Zookeeper in a worker role in a platform as a service. So we're still, the general answer would be yes, you can do that. But we're working on that demo right now. And it's taken us a little bit to get it done. We're planning on publishing it as a virtual machine when we're done, infrastructure as a service. But
But you don't see any reason why.
no, I can't think of any reason why Solr Wouldn't work on a worker role. You know, the operating system will be managed depending on what you want.
Storage gotchas? It's going to get stored somewhere.
No, because actually the storage is handled separately in infrastructure as a service and as platform as a service.
With that, please thank Brian and.
Thanks. And